everyone, Delta One here. Long time no see. I've been trying to reorganize some things in my life because I am I'm sort of trying to set things up to go back to Korea next year, at the beginning of next year. So I'm trying to set things up, and I haven't had much time to do much of anything. But I got a serious question that I was asked to do. This is not my company's thing. It was why I'm not trying to cover it up. But I was asked a serious question about getting pulled over. I haven't been pulled over in quite a long time. So, but I do have friends that are officers. I have families that are officers, families that are state troopers, sheriffs, and such. And I was asked a question. It was a very serious question, I might add. Oh, sorry, I had a real fast flashing of my signal. I thought I had a light out. But I was asked about if they got pulled over by an officer, why do some officers have an attitude when you ask them, why did you pull me over? And why do some officers just get an attitude when you demand, when they don't tell you what they pulled you over for, and just ask you straight for your license, and you demand to know what you want? Why do they have this attitude? It's actually two reasons why. One reason is training. Most officers, I won't say most, some officers are not trained to actually follow the actual steps that would actually make you, understand the whole being pulled over deal. It's not a lot to do with training. It's just mostly to do with training. The other thing is policy. In the state of Mississippi, the state I'm in now, the state of Mississippi requires you to show your license to an officer if they ask you for your license, or an ID. If you don't have a license, you don't have an ID, you're required to show some form of identification if they ask you for it in Mississippi. Some states you don't. Some states you have to have proper cause to ask for an ID. So for instance, if I'm walking through a grocery store and an officer thinks I'm doing something suspicious and I'm not doing anything suspicious, they could stop me and ask me for my license. That is within the officer's right to do that, obviously on duty. But they have that right to do that. If they see me on the streets and they do that, they obviously have that right to ask me for my license. They have that authority. Now, where they don't have an authority is they cannot pull over a vehicle that isn't doing anything to ask them to see their license. That requires you to initiate a traffic stop to ask for your license. In retrospect, like again, that kind of entangles itself with the being able to ask for a person's license. So you have people that are on one side of the fence that understand that an officer, has the right to ask you for your license. So when they pull you over and they, and an officer asks for the license, and the officer generally, like I said, in training, they know, like in our state, we're required to give them our license if they ask for it. So when they come up to you and they ask you for your license registration first, they expect you to just give it to them, because by law you have to issue some form of identification if you don't. If you're asked. Some officers are really lenient, where if you know your driver's license number, they will allow you to do that, and they'll maybe issue. Now, if you're in a car driving, they'll give you a warning for not having your physical license on you. It depends on that officer. So if an officer is trained to, know that you're supposed to give them your license if you ask for it, and they pull you over and you ask for it and you don't give it to them, so that's when they get all rowdy and I guess they're not understanding. I'll put it that way. They're not understanding. And here's the reason why. In this state, at the very least, because I can't speak for other states, but by law, you're not supposed to pull over another vehicle without probable cause. So here's the deal. Remember when I was saying that these two laws of getting pulled over to be able to ask for a license and required to ask for a license where they intertwine and they have an issue? Well, in order for me to give you my license because you asked for it, you have to first initiate a traffic stop in order for me to be able to do that. Now, in order for me to give you my license from the perspective of the individual being pulled over, you have to tell me what you pulled me over for. Whether I agree with it or not, you're supposed to tell them what they pulled them over for to break that first barrier, which is first you need to initiate that traffic stop to get their identification. So in order for you to initiate that traffic stop, you have to have something that person did. Now, a lot of officers do understand this law where you have to have a probable cause to initiate this traffic stop. Like, let's say, for instance, this vehicle has a suspicious person in it. Well, if they see the suspicious person in it, that doesn't give them the right to pull that vehicle over. Now, they can go down as far as saying that this vehicle matches the description of another vehicle. A lot of officers do that. That is, even if that's not true, that is within their right to tell you that to initiate a traffic stop. Now, in those cases, there's two reasons why this is important, and goes for any officers that are watching too. There's two reasons why when you're asked, would you pull me over for that to actually come up. Now, here's the thing. No matter what you tell an officer, no matter what an officer tells you the reason that they pulled you over for, you can't argue with that reason, because there are laws that you don't even know about that you can break that officers do not write you tickets for, or an officer will not pull you over for. An officer can choose any one of those laws, those many laws, to initiate a traffic stop. So you can do something very minor and initiate a traffic stop. So you cannot argue with, no matter how small that issue is, from running a stoplight down to not signaling, or even just not, yielding properly. You can get pulled over for anything. So it's not a lot that an officer has to do to initiate a traffic stop. An officer just chooses which one that they want. Some will argue that it's revenue. Some will argue that the officer's just being an a-hole. But there's a lot an officer could pull you over for. Now, the two reasons that we end up asking an officer this is for two reasons. One, people that know that the traffic stop has to be initiated for a reason for you to get your license. Well, some people ask that reason and want to argue with that reason. Now, keep in mind, no matter how much they argue the police, the stop's justified. As long as the officer gives a justifiable reason for pulling you over, the stop's justified. You can't fight that. You can't just drive away. You're detained. So that's the one reason. Now, the second reason, which is the most important reason that 90% of people that ask, what'd you pull me over for, ask this question, is because any smart person will not incriminate themselves. And here's the thing. If the officer pulls me over, and let's say the reason he pulled me over is because I ran a stop sign. Now, keep in mind, in most cases, some officers will let you by with that and give you a warning, depending on how unsafe the incident was or how you ran that stop sign. Some will give you a warning, or some will just give you a ticket. Like if you run a stoplight here in Hattiesburg, you run a stoplight, that's an automatic ticket. That's an automatic ticket. Any immediate safety issue that you do as a traffic violation is an immediate ticket, no matter what. But if you pulled me over for running that stop sign, but you pulled me over because I was speeding, here's the thing. You write that ticket and come back and tell me that I'm only going to cite you for the speeding, and I'm not going to cite you for the running a stop sign. Now, keep in mind, a stop sign is more severe because it's a higher safety deal than speeding. So in a way, the officer is trying to help you out by writing you the ticket for the speeding that you were doing. Even though you weren't speeding that much, writing you a ticket for the speeding, then they are writing you for running a stop sign. Now, if you told me outright before you actually walked off, the reason you pulled me over is because you ran that stop sign, that person can go to court and fight that. And with the proper fight, can actually get out of that speeding ticket, because that's not what you said you pulled me over for. You said you pulled me over for running the stop sign, but there's no record of you running the stop sign. Now, some officers get around this issue by initiating a warning for the traffic violation of running the stop sign and giving you a ticket for that. Now, this way works both ways. You get a lower fine because you were speeding instead of running a stop sign, which is way worse. And it helps the officer by backing up that, okay, what I initially pulled you over for is on file. So what I'm writing a ticket for, you can't really fight. I say you can't really fight because with a hard enough fight, you can fight that and get out of that. You're still left with the warning, but you can get out of it. In some cases, get a lower. Really depends on how fast you were speeding, though. But that's the reason I want to say the officers that I've spoke to, because I also go to the Coffee with the Cop events here that we have in Hattiesburg. A lot of officers say that that's the reason why they get upset, is because most people don't ask that question because they want to know what they got pulled over for. They actually want to know so they can argue what they got pulled over for, not because they want to know. And I actually talked to to one of the officers, I think it was a detective, while he was a traffic officer, that he had people that would ask him that, so he would not, so if he gave a ticket for something he didn't tell them, they could argue with it and get out of it in court. But most officers get upset because they expect you to give them your license. They expect that, especially in my state, because like I said, in my state, they expect you to give your license because it's a law here to give you their license if they ask for it. The gray area is you have to initiate a traffic stop for someone in a vehicle. Now, here's the thing. This is where that bigger gray area happens. If you're parked in a vehicle, car running or not running, if you're parked, an officer can come up to you and ask you for your driver's license. And if you don't have a driver's license because, whatever reason it's suspended or anything, then it becomes an issue, because just because the officer did not initiate a traffic stop, if you're stopped in a vehicle and you're doing something that he would initiate a traffic stop for, he can come over there and do that. Because at any point in time, if you, let's say, refuse to allow that officer to talk to you, if you're not doing anything at all, you're just sitting there, which, let's be honest, most people that are doing that are not doing something, parked somewhere they should be parked or parked safely. If you are doing something proper, the officer can, can't do anything. Now, here's the thing. There's this thing called loitering, though. If an officer sits there long enough and you sat there long enough, you now become suspicious because now you're loitering. Even if there's no sign around for the loitering, it's not normal in today's age to loiter anywhere in a highly populated area. Especially, it's suspicious if you're, loitering in a non-populated area. So you become suspicious. Now you've given the officer a reason to come talk to you. Even if you have initiated a probable cause to ask for your license, you've now done something to cause the officer concern. So now you're in a conversation with this officer to evaluate the situation, to investigate the situation. So now, if they ask for your license, you have to give it to them, even though it's not a traffic stop. So that's for my subscriber that asked that question. That's why they get upset when you ask them why you got pulled over, because that's kind of a gray area for both a civilian and an officer, where one of them knows their rights and the other one enforces the rights, whereas the right that they're trying to enforce is the one that contradicts the one that the person that knows their rights. So the officer has to tell you what they pulled you over for, but the officer's trying to enforce the right of being able to ask you for your license. So it's kind of a gray area there, but that's pretty much why they're upset with you. And for those that don't like the whole talking thing, this was asked by a subscriber. So whether you like it or not, you ask a question, I'll talk for 15 minutes for that too. But that's to answer your question. Again, I haven't, the policy is the same, but I haven't been pulled over in a good while to actually talk to any of the officers to have this issue. Like, my information is duly from family in the law enforcement and the coffee with a cop thing that we have here every other month or every month. So I don't know. Like I said, the reason I say that is because when you go to coffee with a cop, it's almost like the officers that they choose to do the coffee with a cop events are the friendliest ones, or the ones that like interaction with other people. And the reason I say this is because in Hattiesburg we have 2 divisions pretty much. And the reason I say this is because our city is kind of divided by interstate. So we'll have a coffee with the cop on one side of town and a coffee with the cop on another side of town, and it won't be the same people. The coffee with the cop is usually not with the same people. Sometimes you have the same people, but you get to meet a lot of cool officers there, and they're pretty awesome. So I don't have any really bad experience with them as far as in person. I think I've only had one bad experience, and it didn't really go anywhere. I think I was on my motorcycle. I was on my Ninja 250, and I was going from a stop sign to the first 50 to 100 feet, and I had just started the motorcycle up. It had only been running for like 15 minutes, and he said I went 45 miles an hour in a 30, and the Ninja 250 will not do 50 to 100 yard, not 100 yard, but 50 to 100 feet. And at 45 miles an hour, Ninja 250 carbureted won't do that. Now my FC6 will do that, definitely, but not my Ninja 250. Now, he says I was going that fast, but the thing is I was so close to the car in front of me, I'm pretty sure he got the car in front of me. But anyway, the reason that was pretty messed up was because he got the name of the bike wrong, which is interesting because it's on the side of the bike. The only thing he got right was the color. He didn't get my address right, because my address, I had just moved, and the address still showed my old address, not my new address. So he had so much stuff wrong on the thing that ended up being dismissed. So I have another story about something similar that happened, but I'll go into that another time. But that's like the only time I've ever gotten a bad experience with a cop, and I'll explain why that got dismissed. But I'll do that in another video. Who knows? I might do that later today, or I might do it tomorrow. I don't know. I'm going inside.